So one of the witness statements that Johnny Depp has produced has one of the most alarming statements I've ever heard in it. It talks about Johnny Depp having a cigarette put out on him, because that's totally normal in a relationship. You know what the most insane thing about this is, too? It looks like there's photographic evidence of this transpiring. You see this photograph? You've probably seen a million times. Well, if you zoom in on the picture, stop paying attention to the finger, you'll notice this on his face. That's what they're talking about. Can you imagine the media ignoring that if AH would have made those claims? So hey there, now before we continue our coverage of something this platform hates, let me tell you about our second comic. Link is in the description. This is the last day of our campaign. Now I need you to help us get the word out. Check this out as well, because we're bad guys for covering due process. We're bad guys for talking about industry changes, but that's okay. The people who say that, we don't need them. We need you. So check that out, back it, share the word, and thank you in advance. So if you've missed out on what's been happening for the last week, first of all, welcome back to Planet Earth. You were definitely missed. Here's a hug. Sincerely, we did miss you. And also, Johnny Depp is suing two parties. He's suing News Group newspaper, who owns the tabloid The Sun, and he's suing Dan Wooten, a guy who decided to write a hit piece on Johnny Depp, trying to ruin his life and livelihood. Now in that, we have seen some amazing things disclosed. Awful things, truly, but also amazing things that blow certain tales right out of the water. This is one of those. This is the first witness statement. We're going to call him Stephen D. or SD through it. And yeah, I'm just going to read this to you. I may put in a little bit of talk here and there, and we'll skip a couple of lines. I'll explain why when we get into them. So, I, Stephen D. of London, will say that I was formerly a personal assistant for the claimant, Mr. Johnny Depp, basically, and am now the European president of Mr. Depp's company. I have worked continuously for Mr. Depp since June 2004. In my role as Mr. Depp's assistant, I regularly accompanied Mr. Depp for both work and personal matters. From 2004 to 2017, I probably accompanied Mr. Depp on the majority of work trips. This is important, because of claims that happened supposedly on trips. Now, he says here that basically all of this stuff is true to the best of my knowledge. I was given a lot of papers, basically I may reference them. That's in Exhibit SD1. And, this statement, it is in support of the claimant, Johnny Depp. I've been shown the defendant's amended defense dated the 21st of June 2019 and the amended reply dated the 26th of July 2019. The purpose of the witness statement is to address some of the allegations set out in the amended defense. Basically, what AH said about Johnny Depp? Yeah, I'm going to blow those things out of the water. Now, part 6 is where they start bringing up different paragraphs of the amended defense. And this basically brings up all of AH's stories. He's going to rebuff certain things that come up. So at a general point, I understand that it is alleged in paragraph 8A of the amended defense that, quote unquote, throughout their relationship, the claimant was verbally and physically abusive toward AH. I was with Mr. Depp and AH very regularly throughout their period, and I never saw any cuts, bruises, or other injuries on AH. Neither did AH ever mention that she was the victim of any verbal or physical abuse, with the exception of the matter dealt with, paragraphs 7 to 13 below. So this is going to be the flight portion. And interestingly enough, we don't just have the plight in here, we also have a diagram to give you an idea of how everything is set up. So you can see this. You see the galley, you see where people are sitting and on. You can see Johnny Depp and AH sitting here, plus you have the bedroom, you have the bathroom and everything at the back. So this gives you an idea of how everybody is situated when we get into this. I think that's important. So, at paragraph 8A3, it is alleged that after drinking heavily, the claimant threw objects at AH, causing her to retreat to a different seat. The claimant then provocatively pushed a chair at her as she walked by, yelling at her and taunting her. When AH stood up, the claimant kicked her in the back, causing her to fall over. The claimant then threw his boot at her when she was on the ground. The claimant continued to scream obscenities until he went into the bathroom of the airplane airplane and passed out. I accompanied Mr. Depp and A.H. on the flight and on this date to Boston to L.A., along with Mr. Jerry Judge and Keenan Wyatt. So if you look at the diagram again, you can see Jerry Judge, you see Keenan Wyatt, you see him. You can see how their view is not obstructed here. They have empty, you have countertops and so on, just to give you the layout of everything in it. Who also worked for Mr. Depp. Mr. Judge and I were able to see Mr. Depp and A.H. throughout the flight as our seats were facing them. So Mr. Depp and A.H. sat at the central table on the airplane. You saw the diagram in that. So this account relied upon above is completely untrue. As I was sitting on the flight, I could see that A.H. was speaking at Mr. Depp in an increasingly aggressive manner whilst he was focused on his notebooks, which he often wrote or drew on when flying. At this point, I had my headphones on, so I could not hear the specifics of what she was saying, but I could see her gesticulating, and I could tell from her manner that her voice was raised. She continued to harangue Mr. Depp, whereas he did not engage with the abuse he was receiving. At some point, A.H. stood up, and when her left side was toward Mr. Depp made a playful attempt to tap her on the bottom with his shoe. From where I was sitting, I do not believe that Mr. Depp made contact with A.H. Given the position in which Mr. Depp was sitting, it would have been impossible to kick A.H. in the manner in which she had described. A level of the movement would not have been possible from Mr. Depp's seated position, given the layout of the airplane. However, A.H. took great offense as what is clearly a harmless gesture and increased her abuse of Mr. Depp in an extremely unpleasant manner. By the time I had taken off my headphones and I could hear A.H. shouting at Mr. Depp, I cannot recall the specifics of the abuse, but I do remember her making out the attempted tap as a significant issue. And she does make this a significant issue, just a note. She brings up 14 incidents. This is a major incident. Io Tillett Wright, who's not even here, said that it was profoundly scarring because it happens in front of other people. But continuing, at this stage, Mr. Judge and I decided to intervene in order to attempt to calm down A.H., who was now hysterical and was shouting at the both of us words to the effect of, "Did you see him kick me?" Mr. Judge took A.H. aside, as he often had to do when A.H. regularly lost her temper. Notice those words there, regularly, along with lost her temper, and attempted to calm her down in another part of the airplane. I believe I spoke briefly to Mr. Depp, and he then retreated to the bathroom of the plane, where he remained for the rest of the flight. This was a common theme on multiple times when Mr. Depp was abused by A.H. He would take himself away from the situation, often to a bathroom, and lock himself out of harm's way. During the course of their relationship, I remember Mr. Depp telling me that he would lock himself in the bathroom on multiple occasions, and I remember turning up to find him locked in a bathroom on one occasion, although I cannot remember specifically when this was. We know that this happens too. It happens regularly because there was a conversation about her, hitting him in the head, one we heard that was recorded, and he was hiding in the bathroom. She was going after him in the bathroom. You see a theme there developing, right? Continuing. At no point did Mr. Depp kick A.H. to the ground, nor did he throw a boot at her. Further, it is alleged that he, quote-unquote, pushed a chair at her. This did not happen and would not have been possible in any event, as all chairs in the plane were fixed to the floor, as had been the case in all flights on which I had traveled. So yeah, the chair thing, you can't throw chairs on the plane because they're all fixed. Otherwise, you hit turbulence, they're going to go everywhere. So immediately after the flight, A.H. continued to insist that Mr. Depp had quote-unquote kicked her, both to Mr. Depp and to me and Mr. Judge. This was the exact word she used when she described the incident to me and to Mr. Judge and Mr. Wyatt, despite the fact that the incident took place as described above. The following day, on May 25th, 2014, Mr. Depp asked me to try to mollify A.H. to say whatever was needed to try to placate her. I cannot remember exactly what he said, but it was words to that effect. Given A.H.'s extremely volatile nature, nature, I thought it best to try to engage her on her own terms and simply apologize for what she was alleging had happened. Hence my use of the word quote-unquote kicked, which is the word which A.H. herself had used. As I have made clear, Mr. Depp did not kick A.H. By this stage, I had learned from my interactions with A.H. that her anger was a constant issue. So we hear from her that this is how Mr. Depp is, and yet we hear from everybody else around that this is how she is. Her anger is a constant issue. You have to placate her utilizing her own words, or, well, you know what the ramifications are. Undue pressure, undue stress, and violence. Accordingly, this portion ends here. I always try to simply engage with her on her own terms and to be as nice as possible. So they have January 25th, 2015. So paragraph 8A7 of the amended defense, it is alleged that Mr. Depp physically abused A.H. in the hotel room on a trip to Tokyo, January 2015. I was not present in their hotel room, but I was present on the trip, and A.H. was in good spirits throughout the trip. At no point did she have any cuts, bruises, or other injuries, and at no point did she say anything about Mr. Depp physically abusing her. So yet another incident where, she's having a good time, there are people around, but in retrospect, she builds allegations around it because, hey, everyone always believes her. So then we have the 3rd and the 4th, March 2015. In paragraphs 8A, 8 through 11 of the amended defense, it is alleged that Mr. Depp subjected A.H. to a 3-day ordeal of physical assault, which left her with a broken lip, swollen nose, and cuts all over her body. It's also alleged that Mr. Depp severely injured his finger by slamming a plastic telephone against the wall. I was not present when Mr. Depp sustained the injury to his finger. However, I saw Mr. Depp shortly after, as described below. I had been told by Mr. Judge that Mr. Depp had sustained an injury, although at that time I did not know the cause of the injury. I believe that Mr. Judge and another member of Mr. Depp's security team, Malcolm Connolly, went to the house in which Mr. Depp was staying with A.H. They then picked Mr. Depp up, brought him back to the hotel where we were staying, where Mr. Depp also had a room reserved. It was at that point I saw Mr. Depp, who was clearly in a considerable amount of pain. So he didn't even bring up his injuries until they get there. So when we were in the hotel room with Mr. Depp, we removed some bandaging from his finger and inspected his injury. We were shocked to discover that the tip of his finger had been severed. The gruesome sight clearly indicated that immediate medical treatment was required, and so, along with Mr. Judge and Mr. Connolly, we took Mr. Depp to the hospital. I believe we were at the hospital for a couple of hours before returning to the hotel. Once he returned to the hotel, Mr. Depp went to sleep. The following day, Mr. Depp told me, Mr. Judge, and Mr. Connolly that he had sustained his injuries when A.H. had thrown a bottle at him, which smashed on his finger. So here we clearly have somebody telling us, even though Queen's Counsel or the lawyer for the Sun says otherwise, that 3 people were told who did this, how it happened exactly. It contradicts everything that was told to us, again, from the defense. He also told us, this is bad here, and we were able to see that A.H. had put a cigarette out on Mr. Depp's cheek. I mean, imagine how insane that is, to have somebody do that to you. And he stayed around for it. He not only had somebody chop off his fingertip, but somebody burn him on the face. That's the sign of clearly being a victim. However, it continues, Mr. Depp didn't want to cause alarm by letting the true cause of the injuries be known. Because again, he knows exactly how that's going to come up. He knows that it's going to go after somebody he loves. He feels that he's worthless and on. So he can't get anybody to intervene when somebody is burning him with cigarettes and chopping off pieces of his body. Accordingly, it continues, we were instructed to say that Mr. Depp had caught his finger in a door, which nobody believed. Shortly after this incident, Ben King, Mr. Depp's then house manager, escorted A.H. back to Los Angeles. At no point did he or anyone else mention any evidence of A.H. being the victim of physical abuse. I did not see A.H. at all in the brief period following Mr. Depp's injury. Basically, she was laying low, out of sight, out of mind, and she did not get medical treatment at all, but says that she was terrorized for 3 days. Then you have the various other allegations. In relations to the various other allegations set out in paragraph 8 of the amended defense, I was with Mr. Depp very regularly in this period and saw A.H. on many occasions. At no point did A.H. ever mention any physical abuse, and I never saw evidence of any injury to A.H. In contrast, Mr. Depp told me on multiple occasions that A.H. had attacked him or abused him physically or verbally. The first time A.H. ever made any allegation of physical abuse against Mr. Depp was when she filed for a temporary restraining order, or the TRO, in 2016 in reliance of the alleged incident in paragraph 8A20 of the amended defense on the 21st of May 2016. This is important too. Here, all of the other allegations at paragraph 8 seem to have only been made subsequently. So she keeps inventing fictions, which she's going to add to. Even now, we're going to have new ones. In relations to the TRO, I, along with many others, were extremely surprised and outraged when this hit the press. I knew that A.H. was the abuser in the relationship, and I was appalled that she would behave in this way. She had subjected Mr. Depp to years of abuse, and I knew she had been arrested for domestic abuse in the past in relation to her former wife. So that ends his statement on it, but it's very clear what he is telling you here. I'm around. I saw a lot of stuff going on, and you know what I saw? I saw her being the party that was doling out all the punishment. I saw her flying off the handle, using anything to continue launching volley after volley. Again, she's the bad guy in this. Interesting. How many people have told us that? Now, maybe the person we should be listening and believing, maybe they're the ones with the video evidence and everything else, too. I don't know. Maybe you tell me what you think. So to close, this is our last day of our comic book. Link is in the description, and we need your help getting the word out. Why? Because, again, we talk about stuff like this. Therefore, we're wrong thinkers, but that's okay. We don't need those people that would label us that way. We need you. This is a 40-page, all-age, meaning for everyone, Lovecraftian extravaganza. This is in full color, and also, since it met funding stretch goals, you not only get that, but you get 3 cards with it, you get a postcard, you get a sticker, and if it hits other goals, you'll get a poster as well. All of that for backing. So check that out, and as always, I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. You make these endeavors possible. Without you, none of this works. So thank you sincerely. More people should tell you that. And until next time, thank you.